Why is it that you've done like 1,000 low lunges and yet your hips feel just as tight as they always have? You're seeing little to no improvement at all. And you can just predict the results after a yoga class. You're like, I'm going and I'm sure it's doing something, but I don't really know what. Well, today I'm going to change that for you because you are practicing low lunge incorrectly, and that is why you're not seeing any results. The problem in a yoga class is we look around us and we see other people that are like all the way down to the ground and their elbows are on the floor and whatever else. And that actually does so much more harm than good because that encourages you to go out of alignment, to go further, because we're competitive creatures. It's normal. Nothing to feel shame about. I'm guilty of it too. But we have to take a step back and we have to acknowledge where we're at. And that's how you're going to see results. Because when you're going down like that, you're most often sending one hip forward. You're not actually stretching the correct muscles. And you're actually stretching only one muscle too instead of multiple, and putting in the actual work that's necessary to lengthen the surrounding muscles of the hip joint. Alignment is key. So, how do you actually do a low lunge to see results? When you come to your low lunge, first thing that you need to think about is there a nice long straight line from my knee that's on the floor all the way up to the top of my head? If so, you're on the right track. Then you want to tuck in your pelvis. Boom, you're going to feel a huge stretch in the front of that hip. Then you want to make sure that your hips are in line. You don't want the hip on the front leg side to be facing forward. You want them to be as in line with each other as possible. And if your knee starts hurting like mine is, just flip over your mat and we shall continue. Once you have a nice long line and your hips are in line with each other, you tuck in the pelvis as much as you can. Then you can really feel that deep stretch in the front of that right hip. Then you take a deep breath in through the nose. And then as you exhale, you don't come more forward, you send your hips forward. So your upper body is not coming forward, because what happens? Feel what happens if you come into this position when you send your upper body forward. That stretch is actually going to lessen. You really want to focus more on sending your hips forward, because that's actually going to pull the muscle in the front of that hip, okay? But if you're coming forward, you're actually softening it. You start to get into other muscle groups and it's just not going to be effective to lengthen the hip flexor. So inhale, exhale, send your hips forward. So deep, so intense. One more time, inhale, and then exhale, send that hip forward. And that is how you do a low lunge, not when you're getting closer to the ground. I'm not saying that those stretches aren't effective. It's just that stretching and mobility work, it's incredibly technical. You need to make sure that you understand the alignment that your anatomy is in. And if you don't, that's exactly why I'm here. But when we're getting down to the ground like this, what is actually stretching, right? You start to feel it more over here. So it's a totally different position. So you're wondering why your hip flexor, when often this is actually the furthest your hip can go, right? Like you can only do so much extension of that hip flexor. But when you're utilizing a nice straight line up to the ceiling, tucking in the pelvis, you're able to get a little further. You're able to actually get into the psoas as well, and you're able to really start to lengthen. So I'm not saying that this does nothing. I'm saying that it incorporates different muscle groups and it doesn't get as deep into the muscle fibers as we would like. And especially if you are compensating because you're not flexible enough and you start maybe turning your toes in, sending one hip forward and then really getting out of alignment, well then you're really not going to see any results. So I hope that that was helpful. Thank you so much for watching my tutorial and spending a little moment with me to learn how to do flexibility easier, more simple. That's why we're here. We're in the results business. Thank you so much for spending your time with me, and I will see you in the next one.